Welcome to Bitter Reality Brewing. This is the top 10 tips, tricks, recommendations, hacks, suggestions, whatever you want to call them. Don't forget, like, subscribe, keep sharing. Definitely appreciate it. Definitely appreciate it. We're going to jump right into this. And this top 10, we're going to cover bottling, priming, labeling, things to do with sharing your beer. So number one, and this is something I never really thought of and didn't actually know until pretty recently. When you're priming your beer by adding sugar, this will actually increase your ABV. Duh, you're adding sugar and the yeast is eating it. Just didn't think about it. So a good example is on neighborhood is usually about 1/4%, so it's not a lot. So let's say you're handing out a bottle and you're telling everybody it's 5.5% ABV, which is always a little on the estimated side. It's probably closer to 5.75 actually, based on, there's a lot of based on, let's just put it that way, but in the neighborhood of about 1/4%, I was told, and from what I've read, that seems pretty true. So number two, always measure your priming sugar by weight, not by volume. Oh, I need to do it by weight. If you know anything about baking bread from scratch, you'll go, oh yeah, by weight. Trust me on that one. Number three, corn sugar is not the only sugar you can use for priming. Now keep in mind that you can use raw sugar, you can use brown sugar, you can use honey, maple syrup, you can use all these different things. You can use DME, all these nice things can be used to carbonate your beer if you're doing bottle conditioning or keg conditioning. They will impart a flavor or change the flavor a little bit. Corn sugar is probably about the most neutral that I'm aware of. But these are things that you should consider and say, you know what, I got a DeBell, I'm gonna drop some brown sugar in there and bottle that bad boy. I mean, why not? Number four, if you're really new to brewing and you're bottling and you're really scared when you're doing adding your priming sugar, you don't wanna, either add too much or you're afraid of the oxidization that you might be adding to that beer, bingo, you can get yourself little carbonation drops. And the carbonation drops are not going to let you control too much on how much carbonation you want, but it'll be a lot safer than making carb bombs or not putting enough sugar or maybe not stirring that priming sugar enough to where some bottles are carb bombs and other ones just never seem to carbonate. Been there, done that one. It's been a long time, but so carbonation drops are what they call them. These are the Brew Firm ones. They call them Buckrider bottle shots, but it's the same thing. They're little tiny balls of sugar. Number five, remember when handing out bottles of bottle conditioned beer to family, friends who maybe don't drink craft beer and they're not familiar with bottle condition and what that means, after they chill it, tell them to pour it into a glass slowly, and that last little sip, they can even look and they'll see that yeast coming down. Stop. Now, if you forget to tell them, the problem is they're not going to enjoy your beer as much if it wasn't meant to be very bitter, because they're going to get that extremely bitter bite from the yeast if it comes out. But on the good side, they'll get a mega dose of B vitamins. So, it's all in how you look at it. But yeah, not everybody, that you're giving your beer out understands that there's a yeast cake at the bottom if that's bottle conditioned. And it may sit nice and packed, it may not, but that's something to be aware of. Number six, something to help you with the yeast in the bottom. If you overfilter your beer, or let's say you cold crash it, extremely cold crash, the yeast just falls out of suspension, and now you want to bottle it, consider Lallemand's cask and bottle conditioning yeast. I've used it, I love it. It's been a while since I've used it, but it will form a nice, tight, packed yeast cake on the very bottom, and unless they shake that bottle, that stuff, very little might come out or none might come out based on how long it's been sitting in that fridge and letting it compact down. But Lallemand's cask bottle conditioning yeast is awesome for doing your bottle conditioning, should we say, especially if you've overfiltered or you're afraid you don't have any yeast left in suspension. Number seven, and before I say number seven, let me apologize to the people out there that go, that's not funny. And then for the rest of you, I know you're gonna get a good chuckle out of this. How to avoid sediment in the bottom of your bottles. Keg, then move the beer to your bottles after it's already been carbonated. Yeah, you won't have any yeast in the bottom of the bottle. I know some of you are out there going, that's not funny because I don't keg. I know. I mean, if you can even do one and do, it's nice to not have to tell anybody, hey, don't worry, please worry about the yeast, or don't pour the yeast into your beer. Number 8, if you're bottling multiple beers, make sure either you make labels, mark on a piece of paper and stick it on there, I don't know, or do what I do a lot is I use different colored caps. And if I run out of different colors, because I have so many different beers I bottled, and whether it's being put in my beer fridge or given out as a 6-pack or 2 6-packs to friends, make a legend at least, like I for IPA, D for Dunkel, and you can give them a piece of paper and say, hey, these are what the letters mean, or send them an email, something like that. That way they know what they're drinking and they're not just popping it and pour and go, and you don't want them hitting that 8% and then hitting that 4%, because they're not going to taste that 4%. It's going to be like, hey, this kind of tastes watery. So, but if you're doing a lot of bottles, find a way to keep them separate so you know which bottle's which. I'm not a big fan of labels, which leads me into number 9. I'm not a big fan of labels anymore. But if you want to make labels, consider using something like Microsoft Publisher. You can get labels from Avery. You can get labels from onlinelabels.com, which I like. I've been using them for years for all kinds of labels. But keep in mind, it can be simple. I mean, right now I do make a basic label that just says the beer, what it is, and what the ABV is. I don't want anybody slamming down an 8% thinking it's a 4 or 5%, and crashing out going, man, what did you give me? That stuff knocked me out. I like people to have kind of a heads up. Hey, this might be high or this might be low. And that way they can decide what they want to drink first. And I want to let them know what kind of beer it is. So that's what I do. Now, if you're trying to make it really fancy and you're like me, you can barely draw a stick figure, go out on the internet, steal someone else's idea. You're just handing this out to friends and family. It's not like you're, trying to sell it. You're not a big brewing company stealing someone else's label. You're just either going to take their ideas and apply it to yours, or you're going to take their whole label maybe and change a few things and stick it on yours. And there's tons of people out there giving out things like that. There's even a company out there who I do not remember, I want to say it's Grog something or something like that makes labels that are reusable, which is kind of cool. So you can have like your own little branding, have them redo the label, and I think some of them even allow you to write stuff on it. I'm not sure dry erase what it is, but something to be aware of. So I'll put a picture of my favorite label, which is Blushing Ginger. It's a beer I'm working with Pierre from Simple Home Brew out of Australia. If you haven't checked out Simple Home Brew, definitely check it out. It keeps everything very simple, very basic. It does some crazy stuff, which is awesome. Number 10, labels are nice if you're handing them out, and that's what I was saying. At least put something on there to let them know what they're drinking and what the ABV is. So number 10 would be just kind of give some sort of label, and if it has to go back to the cap, which I told you about, you can use caps, put a legend on there, and then send them that, and make sure you let them know what the ABV. I mean, I really hate giving out a beer and not telling someone what an ABV is, so I don't do it. Even if I'm just handing a single bottle, like I recently did to my local home brew shop, I'm like, hey, it's a boom, 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 and it's right around 6%, or 5.9 to 6%. And he's like, oh, cool. That way he has a heads up, because trust me, they'll have a few during the day, maybe on a rough day, or they'll share with some friends, and they don't want their friend walking back out, going somewhere on a 9%er when, they could go next door and have something to eat and chill out for a while. So just saying. Thank you again for joining us here at Bitter Reality Brewing. Don't forget, like, subscribe, keep sharing. Definitely appreciate it. Thank you again.